We're at a point now where the calls for Medicare for all have become so overwhelming that the Democratic Party knows that they have to deliver for their base because they are demanding it now. 70% of Americans overall support Medicare for all. A slim majority of Republicans support Medicare for all, and nearly 90% of Democrats support Medicare for all. We've planted our feet firmly in the ground, and we are refusing to budge. And that scares Democrats because they know that they've got to deliver on something. Otherwise, there will be hell to pay. Now, thankfully, it's the case that a majority of Democrats in the House of Representatives already support Medicare for all, but only a handful of Senate Democrats back Medicare for all, and they're currently scrambling to propose something that would appease us that's not Medicare for all. So we see a public option being proposed. We're seeing fixes to the Affordable Care Act. We're seeing them increasing the eligibility pool or trying to increase the eligibility pool for Medicare or allowing people to buy in at younger ages or at 55 and older. So you're seeing them basically trying to dangle something in front of us in hopes that we'll bite, but we've made it very clear. When we have 70% of the country on our side, we would be idiots to back down. So we're not going to back down, but nonetheless, that hasn't stopped some Senate Democrats from trying. And as a Politico article by Alice Miranda Olstein and Adam Cancrin points out, several likely 2020 Democratic presidential candidates are pushing plans for something short of universal health care, a move already creating friction within the party's empowered left wing, which has panned any attempts to water down the progressive dream of a single-payer system. One idea gaining support is allowing some demographic groups to buy into Medicare earlier than age 65 while still incrementally building on Obamacare coverage gains. It's easy to say Medicare for all and make a good speech, but see no action, said Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio, a potential 2020 candidate who has a proposal that would give retiring police and firefighters access to Medicare before 65. I want to see action. It's a pathway Brown and many in the party establishment have gravitated toward in recent months, one that balances the desire to make a Trump-era lurch leftward with memories of the political blowback Democrats endured for a decade after their last revamp of the nation's health system. So the Democrats, with their eyes on 2020, have introduced at least 8 plans for expanding health coverage beyond Obamacare's gains. They range from modest Medicare reforms to more ambitious restructurings that would extend government-run care to millions of new patients, an array of options that fall short of campaign trail promises for full Medicare for all. That spectrum includes Senator Debbie Stabenow's bill allowing patients to buy into Medicare starting at age 55, which Brown also supports, and Tim Kaine and Michael Bennett's plan to create a Medicare-style public option to compete with private insurers on up to bigger revamps like Senators Jeff Merkley and Chris Murphy, and their expansion of Medicare eligibility to nearly all Americans. Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii would let everyone purchase Medicaid. Those options have been characterized by supporters as more practical alternatives to the completely government-run system popularized by Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Pramila Jayapal. Now, in addition to these bills, Elizabeth Warren is someone who also co-sponsored Bernie Sanders' bill, like Jeff Merkley and Brian Schatz, but opted for a compromise plan to get something that's short of Medicare for all. Now, why would you waste your time using precious political capital on anything but Medicare for all, especially when most of the country now is with you on Medicare for all? It's because these Democrats are getting cold feet and they're trying to weasel their way out of Medicare for all. So understand that if you have one of these senators, minus Jeff Merkley, that co-sponsored Bernie's bill, but then went on to co-sponsor or create their own bill that's not Medicare for all, you need to go to town halls when they come to your city and confront them. Ask them why they're willing to compromise on a plan that 70% of the American public supports. It's about accountability, because if you simply just sit back and expect these Democrats to do the right thing when they have lobbyists and health insurance industry puppets in their ear all the time, then they're not going to do the right thing. So this is about us doing our part and keeping constant pressure on them. But understand one thing, even if you may feel disappointed at the fact that they're trying to propose some other weasel, non-Medicare for all bill, understand that it's a sign that we are winning, because just the mere fact that they know they have to act in and of itself is a victory, because we've made so much noise about Medicare for all that they can't not hear us. So now it's just them trying, it's their last attempt to get us to bite on anything that's not Medicare for all. It's not going to happen. Now, one thing I want to touch on is the House Medicare for All bill. So formerly it was HR 676, but John Conyers, who was the former co-sponsor of that bill, is no longer in Congress. So we needed someone new to take up that mantle, and that individual, thankfully, is Pramila Jayapal, someone who I initially felt safe as the new sponsor, the new person to take on the mantle of Medicare for All in the House. However, we see some red flags coming out of that development, because not only is Representative Pramila Jayapal opting to rewrite HR 676, which is the gold standard, but she's doing it in secret while not really consulting with people and organizations, more specifically, who have been advocating for Medicare for All for decades. Now, as Russell Mockeber of Common Dreams reports, now, with Democrats in charge of the House, the Medicare for All single-payer bill is being rewritten, watered down, and renumbered. For the past 16 years, HR 676 was our gold standard bill, defining a national improved Medicare for All single-payer healthcare system for the United States, said Margaret Flowers of Health Over Profit for Everyone. It was based on the 2003 Physicians Working Group proposal by Physicians for a National Health Program. Now that the Democrats can no longer ignore their base is demanding a single-payer health system, we have lost both HR 676 by number and its status as the gold standard. From what we have heard, as we have still not seen the text of the draft as promised, the new health bill being written by Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal has an unnecessarily long transition period and maintains the for-profit providers in the system. The delayed transition means more preventable deaths and suffering. Keeping the for-profits means higher costs and lower quality of care. Jayapal's bill is being rewritten behind closed doors. Last month, single-payer advocates called on Jayapal to share the draft text of HR 676 with the single-payer movement for review and input. She has refused. Now, let me re-emphasize something here. We haven't seen the bill yet, which is a problem in and of itself, but we can't necessarily say that it is in fact being watered down, but given the indications that we've received thus far, it doesn't look too good. Now, rewriting HR 676 when health advocacy groups have deemed it the gold standard, that's troubling, but I could deal with that if you're actually improving it. There are some improvements that you can do. You can expand abortion access in there and actually fund abortion, which the older version of HR 676 did not. I think that would be a phenomenal improvement, but as far as we know, it's getting watered down. Now, again, we don't know what the final version will look like, so we'll have to wait to reserve judgment, but let's look at this. Okay, so in the event for-profit institutions are maintained in the new version of HR 676, why is that problematic? Because it will inevitably lead to death by 1,000 cuts. Because when you have that for-profit motive in the system itself, well, there's going to be a fight to privatize portions of our Medicare for All system, and it's going to get watered down. It may not go away. It may still be preferable than what we have now, but nonetheless, if you want true Medicare for all, then you need to make sure that the profit motive is removed. And it was from HR 676, hence why it was deemed the gold standard. But now it seems as if it's up in the air as to why that would be the case. Now, another thing is the delays. So HR 676, the way that it was structured before, because it was a framework, was that if we pass Medicare for All in April of 2022, then January 1st, 2023, it gets fully implemented. There's no long wait period like the Affordable Care Act where it's gradually rolled out. Certain portions are implemented in 1 year and after, and so on and so forth. Now, look, this is kind of a mixed area. There's some people that would argue, well, it's important that there is this gradual rollout, because if you think about this, we need people in the health insurance industry to have some time to be able to find a different job. And I get that argument, but it's less persuasive than the argument against the wait time. Because if we have a wait time, what you're doing is you're making yourself susceptible to attacks. Now, we talked about this in the last Humanist Report Patreon live chat, and we had Andrea Whitty, who went over how we pay for Medicare for All with me, explain that this is something that's troubling because think about this. If you pass Medicare for All in 2022 and it's not fully implemented until 2029, well, you allow for a long period of time where Republicans can come to power and then water it down. They can build a coalition, form a tax on it, and if Americans, even if they support it now, if they don't fully know all the benefits that will come to fruition with Medicare for All, then that allows them to be duped by Republicans and health insurance providers, and they could think, oh, well, maybe it is as bad as they say because I haven't seen the benefits. So the reason why programs like Social Security have been protected, and anytime a president has tried to privatize it, even partially, they had to back down because the opposition to it from the public was fierce. Well, it's because the public knows what they're getting. So we need the public to know immediately the benefits of Medicare for All, so Republicans will be less inclined to touch it. Another thing that is being talked about here with regard to this delayed rollout is if these health insurance companies and their CEOs know that their time is limited and the ship is sinking, so to speak, are they going to stay on that ship and go down with it, knowing that their days are numbered? No, they're going to move on to the next money-making venture, meaning that will leave some people temporarily without health care as they wait for Medicare for All to kick in. So it's just, there's more risks in allowing for this delay. It's not a deal breaker. I would still fiercely advocate for, Medicare for All in that state. But it's just, when you have the gold standard, I just don't see a reason to rewrite it. Now, trying to be fair to Pramila Jayapal, she's probably doing this because she wants to make it easier to pass, because in order for Medicare for All to pass, well, these bills have to reach parity. The House version and the Senate version have to match in order for it to be signed into law. We all know this, right? So by making it more like Bernie Sanders' bill, and Bernie Sanders' bill does in fact have the delay, it's better than not having Medicare for All. But ideally, healthcare advocates have been hoping to bring Bernie Sanders' bill into parity with HR 676 because that's just the better version. Myself, I'm going to wait and see what it looks like, because it's not like, oh, well, this is Medicare for All and this is the final version. You can always rewrite it. You can add amendments and it can be reintroduced again when, Democrats actually have full control of government. But I mean, we need to make sure that we're clear that we want Medicare for All, and we have to be savvy and know about the details and why this delay is bad and why the for-profit incentive has to be completely eliminated. Now, I don't want to shit on Pramila Jayapal because I think she's done a lot of great things, and I'm very thankful that we have someone who's taking on the mantle of Medicare for All in the House and being the chief advocate for it. But we just need to understand that there's no reason to water it down, because if you're watering it down, you're already kind of conceding and buckling before the real fight even begins. So if Democrats are willing to concede on certain aspects of Medicare for All now, when we're not even discussing it on the House floor, that's a problem. So that's less problematic than what's being done in the Senate, but I'm not too mad at what senators are doing, because it tells me that they know they have to act, and this is their last ditch effort to try to muster up support from some other half measure, and it's not going to happen. Now, the thing that I find most disappointing is Sherrod Brown, who a lot of people deemed as a progressive, but throughout the years, he's kind of showed that he's not progressive. He's certainly not a Bernie Sanders, and he's not even as progressive as Elizabeth Warren. He didn't co-sponsor Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill, and yet people widely consider him a progressive. And he's done things that are phenomenal. He supports policies that are pro-workers' rights and unions that are phenomenal. But if you don't back Medicare for All, then that tells me that you have this moral blind spot because you're okay with a system where certain people are left out. Because think about this. Even if you drastically improve our current for-profit system and we have a public option, that would expand access to millions of people. But you're still saying that you have to have money to have healthcare in this country. You still need money to buy into a public option. And even if the cost would be cheaper in that system because you're forcing these private health insurers to compete with a public option, the government-run plan, which would obviously be cheaper because it's more efficient and whatnot. Well, you're still saying that in order to have healthcare, you need money. So at a time when 70% of Americans, including a majority of Republicans, support Medicare for all, if we back down now, we're just idiots. So it's on us to hold these public officials accountable and not let them back down. Because they're going to get cold feet. Even people on our side might feel pressure to back down because they're facing so much backlash. But understand that this is our chance. If public opinion polls go out of favor for Medicare for all because we stop talking about it, let's say 10 years down the line, we may not get this opportunity again. So we have to be very firm and direct. When we say it's Medicare for all, that's all we're going to expect. Now, somebody on Twitter pointed out, if it's not Medicare for all, I send it back. Exactly. Now, people may say that, you're being unreasonable and you just have these purity tests and litmus tests. But understand, again, we have the moral argument, we have the moral high ground, and also we have the political argument. Because if you deliver Medicare for all, then you will be infinitely more popular because 70% of the American people support it. And you have to account for public opinion decreasing once the debate begins, right? Because Fox News will attack it relentlessly if it's discussed on the House or Senate floors. But with 70%, we have a cushion. We'll still have a majority, even if it goes down 10 points. So now is the time to act. Don't let these politicians pull one over on you and convince you that, this other option is more pragmatic because it's easier to pass. We want full Medicare for all, where healthcare is free at the point of service. That's all that we're asking for, and it's all that we are going to accept. And if you're not going to deliver that for us, we're going to find someone who will. Simple as that.
Girly Mike Fettuccini needs your support on Patreon. What a loser. Visit patreon.com/Humanist Report to support the low ratings Humanist Report. Sad. My views are much higher.